Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to the next video in the Object Pool Unity tutorial series. So in the first video, what we did was I showed you how to use the concept of object pooling. So as we had discussed, to refresh, object pooling is the concept of taking an object and being able just to reuse resources. Inside of Unity, it can get quite expensive whenever you want to come inside of the inspector and instantiate and destroy objects constantly. It runs up a lot of memory, and so what we did was we set it up in the last episode, the concept of object pooling. So what I have here is I have this object pool that starts off with an amount of 10 fireballs. I can only have up to 10 at one time. And we'll go ahead and click the can expand box. This will allow it to be able to go above the 10 limit. So if it gets all the way up to 10, and this list here, they're all inactive at the moment. They're all usable. Once I get to 10, you can see they all pop up, and then they start to disappear. What happens is it goes back through the list here, and then it deactivates. So what's happening is in our code, we create an object pool or mono behavior. We create a static instance of it, so there can only be just one instance of this attached to a game object. Normally the static means you can use a class without an instance of the class, and that's what we're doing here. I did it this way just to show you a way that you can use the one of the design patterns, singleton pattern. So here what I did was on awake we set it as an instance to this. We have a list of object pool items, which are going to be all the items that we want to pull from, which would be here. So we want to pull the prefab fireball, 10 of them. It can expand or it can't expand. That's all we'll do. We'll leave it to can expand for now. The pool game object list is how many copies it made of every object in here and puts it in this list for us. And then when start gets called, this is only going to get called once in its entire lifetime. It's going to say, hey, initialize the list with new objects of game objects for each object that's in there. So if you have a fireball and then you have a lightning bolt and things like that, it'll loop through all of them and say, okay, at the current index, loop through the amount to pull. So if you want a fireball to have 10 times, it's going to come into here, instantiate 10, set them to false, active in the hierarchy, and then just add them to that list. The reason we do this is because this is all happens when the scene loads. This is on start. This only happens one time. But the power in this is in this other function we have here, get pooled object. In our game controller, we have a function inside of update. We click the mouse button, get the mouse coordinates, and get the pooled object fireball. By the tag name, it kicks back a projectile. If it's not null, we'll give it a position and then set it to true. So this is where it turns on. And then it deactivates. Each fireball has a destructible script attached to it, so when it gets on enabled, it starts this coroutine, which it says wait 3 seconds and then deactivate yourself. On enable is what you want to call in this situation, because on enable happens every time the object that has this script attached to it as a component gets enabled. So if you come into here in Unity and a game object, this is on, now it's off, now it's on and off, and then back on again. Whenever you do that, it's considered enabling and disable, on enable and on disable. This is what gets called on the fireball whenever we set it to true and when we set it to false. So I'm not going to need the start function anymore. So in this video, so this is one of the ways I did it was with this static instance. Well, maybe you don't want to use this and you want to use a excuse me, a scriptable object instead. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do in this one, is show you how to do it with a scriptable object. We're literally going to copy the code from object pooler and put it into another script. We'll call this one, let's just say object pool. Object pool. Like this. And then when it's done compiling down here, come inside of here, double click it, open it up. This is actually going to inherit from scriptable object. Awesome. And we're not going to need a start, or we're not going to use the start or update functions. Okay. What we'll do now is we're going to come into here and we'll create an asset menu for it. So create asset menu, and then for the sake of the tutorial, we'll call the file name, then we'll set it to object pool. That's just what we'll call it. You can call it whatever you want. And now in here, so what is the object pool gonna have? Well, it's gonna have a lot of this. It's gonna have a list of object pool items, a public list of that. It's also going to have the pool game objects. So we'll come into here and put that here. Okay, that's what it's going to have. And then what else are we going to do? Well, there is no constructor for a scriptable object. So what we'll do is we'll create a public void init function. And then inside of here, what we're going to do is exactly what we did over here in the start function. It's the exact same code. Like this. Okay? Exact same code. And then underneath, we'll go and we'll also go into object pooler, and this code right here, get pooled object, we're just going to copy that too. I'm going to copy that over, go to object pool, paste it. So then, one big difference is in game controller, we're not going to have an instance of a fireball prefab anymore. We don't even need it. What we're actually going to do is we're going to have a public reference to an object pool. Object pool. And then on awake, whenever this gets executed for the first time, we're going to go ahead and take our object pool and we're going to initialize it. And then inside of here, instead of doing object pooler instance get pooled object, you can actually take that off and just call object pool that get pooled object. And that's literally all the difference is going to be. And it seems like we just ended up copying and pasting the code over, which we did, and I'm going to tell you why we went about doing this in a moment. This is optional. You don't have to do this. It worked the same way before. It's going to work the exact same way now. There's going to be one difference. So you'll notice in the game controller we have a reference to an object pool now instead of a fireball prefab. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click in here, create, and then object pool. Click it. We now have an object pool. You can call it whatever you want. I call object pool resources just because. And then inside of here you would set this to one object, You set this just like you did in the other one right here. You can click this little button here. Popped up with a separate window off screen, but this is what it looks like. I would click my fireball prefab. I want it to be able to spawn 10, and it can expand. So now we have this object pool resources. We have this instance of this scriptable object now in our assets. You can take this and save this data out of your game, any of your application, and you can load it back in at a later time and keep all that saved data. Versus if you would have kept this here, you'd have to make sure you save it out, load it back in as an object pool, and then you'd have to remember in your scenes that you want to have an object pooler, you'd have to make sure an object in your scene contains this script. Because if you forget to put this script on there, guess what? You have no object pool. So if you need that, and let's say you have 3 scenes in a game and they all have shooting, because you have 3 different characters that shoot for various reasons. Like you have 3 different mini games or 3 different stages. You don't want to have to possibly go in there and say, okay, I need to make sure every single one of these has this script attached to it, this component. Well, no, that's what's great about having the scriptable object. You can come into here to the game controller, and all you do is just assign it to a scriptable object resource. That's it. And if for some reason you forget to do that, you can always assign it in code. And same thing with the other component. These are just a lot easier to save out because you can save out a scriptable object to a save file, load it back in at any time. A saved object, if you modify this at runtime, it will keep the changes through each and every single scene of your game. The only time it's going to lose any changes it has made since the beginning of the application is when you shut the application off and you are completely done with the game. So you start the game and you have an object pool that has a fireball with an amount 10, and you play 4 or 5 levels, and now you have 3 or 4 new objects in here. One's a lightning bolt, and, one's like some kind of fire blast skill or whatever. So now you have 3 objects in this pool that you can spawn. When you get to the end of the game, you turn it off, turn it back on, it's going to start back over with this default here. But between each scene, as the game progresses, when you load a scene, all of this saves into this scriptable object and stays as the application is running. It's until you turn the application off that you'll lose the data unless you save it externally and then load it back in at runtime. But in this case, for when we run the example here, it's still going to work. But you can see what's going to happen to the object resources here. Okay, and here's your pooled object. There should be none. They all type or mismatch just because right here it already spawned them. So you do 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. See how it pops up on the scriptable object, how it's saving? So if we were to go into another scene right now, all 19 of these would still be here. And what would happen, all 19 would still be in here. You can disregard the type mismatch situation. And yeah, so now you got all these in the scene now. You look at the game controller, you got this, and when you change scenes, it'll switch. So I personally like to use scriptable objects for any kind of data that I'm going to have in a game or application I'm making in Unity, to where it's simply just going to be data. This object here is simply for me to use as a resource pool to grab data from. That's it. You want to make an item inventory database, this is what I would like to use, because it's just easily data that's accessible. All I'm saying is, hey, on initialize, set up the pool of objects, and then give me the objects when I tell you to. And that is it. If you don't want to use any of that, then by all means you can still use this object pooler script. This was just in case you wanted to use a scriptable object instead. That's how you could go about it. But that'll be pretty much it for this tutorial. I enjoyed making this one quite a bit. I like using the object pool any chance that I get because it saves a lot of CPU. and a lot of memory whenever you're creating games and you want to just make a shooter and you want to shoot out so many bullets, or you want to get upgrades, then you can expand the pool, and it's all kinds of fun. I think it'll help all of you, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. It's a little bit of a new concept to me as well, but it's fun tackling these concepts and having the audience to view, and I hope it'll be able to be a blessing to all of you to be able to understand it, and I hope I did at least an okay job of explaining it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can let me know inside the comments. I do appreciate everyone giving the views and taking the time to listen. So, I hope y'all enjoy the weekend. Y'all stay safe out there. And any more future videos you'd like to see about specific topics, let me know. Leave a comment. Let me know if things you'd be interested in learning in. And we can go ahead and I can teach those. If I don't know them, I will gladly learn them so I can teach you as well. And watch our fireballs one last time instantiate and disappear. And boom. There you go. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Bye, y'all.